The 2025 TV shootout crowned the Sony Bravia 8 Mark II as the king of TVs and left the LG G5 in last place.
So the winner of the Value Electronics King of TV shootout, Sony Bravia 8 Mark II.
SDR. Their victory was so vast. HDR I found the most intriguing. But here's the thing. Those results came after extensive professional calibration. And most of you at home are not going to pay $500 for a professional calibration. So what happens if we compare the winner and the loser out of the box? No calibration, head to head. This is today's rematch, and the results will surprise you because it definitely left me scratching my head. Generally speaking, reputable comparisons run by calibrators measure accuracy in a controlled reference environment with all the TVs fully calibrated, using content designed to expose the weaknesses of all these TVs. And then afterwards, you have a score. And so the winner and the loser is actually ranked against the most difficult scenes you're ever going to find, which means you will probably not see most of these scenes in your day-to-day content. More importantly, and most relevant to you, you guys aren't getting your TV calibrated. Yes, I know some of you will. And as you'll see by the end of this video, you may need a professional calibration depending on what you value most. But the thing is, you rarely see these challenging content scenes in your day-to-day viewing. But in a real living room, what you actually value is HDR impact, natural skin tones, streaming quality with low bitrate content of old TV shows. So let's rerun the comparison with the winner and the loser of the TV shootout with real-world content, real-world movie scenes, real-world TV shows, news, and examine which TV is actually better out of the box, uncalibrated. We'll start with HDR impact. And as you know, there are so few movies that have true bright HDR scenes. For that, we have to go to YouTube, specifically Jennifer Gala's YouTube channel, either her personal channel or the HDR Super channel, and there you will see 1,000 nit content, 2,000, 4,000, even 10,000. But for the purposes of this comparison, we'll keep it to 4,000 and under, because the reality is, good luck finding anything over 1,000 nits, but you want to know what you're really paying for, because both the G5 and the Bravia 8 Mark II are flagship TVs, so they're going to overperform. The question is, how much of an overperformer are they in bright, punchy content? The LG G5 nails specular highlights above 1,000 nits, no doubt. The Sony Bravia 8 II pulls brightness back just a little. Fine for most movies, but technically less accurate. So if you're buying a TV for maximum HDR impact, watching the brightest content on YouTube, the G5 flexes harder. But HDR is only as good as the content, right? So if the content says HDR, but the reality is it's only 100 nits, well, it's SDR posing as HDR. So let's pull one of the greatest blockbusters of the summer, Jurassic World Rebirth. Unfortunately, the HDR impact of this movie, this is the creator's intent, is quite disappointing, rarely ever hitting 300 nits. Well, if that's the case, both TVs will excel because both TVs are capable of more than 1,000 nits specular highlights. Nevertheless, they look great. So let's compare this blockbuster movie, which is really not an HDR impact movie, but it's one of the latest blockbusters that's out right now. And many of you are watching it and wondering, hey, how does it look on the G5 or the Bravia 8 II? Which one should I get for this movie? So let's look at the scene-to-scene comparisons. As you can see, both TVs coast through these scenes with ease. Almost too easily. I mean, 300 nits at brightest, right? Most of the movie doesn't even exceed 200 nits as far as specular highlights are concerned. Instead, it looks like it was made for LG's entry-level B5, and maybe it was, you know? Most movies don't require the G5 or even the C5. The B5 can get away with making Jurassic World Rebirth look like an amazing HDR movie, when in fact, creator's intent is a little flat. But enough about brightness. But you know what's more commonplace than HDR impact at above 800 nits? We're talking about shadow detail. Things that happen below 3 nits. Yeah, it doesn't sound like a lot, but you'll be surprised how much streaming and TV shows happen below 5 nits or even below 3 nits. Don't be shocked. And so we're going to look at extraction as a comparison. Out of the box, the G5 runs a little darker than reference, while the Sony Bravia 8II looks a bit brighter than reference. The good news is that both can be dialed in easily without a professional calibration if brightening or darkening the shadow detail is what you need. On the G5, just raise shadow detail to level 2 or 3 depending on your preference. In a brighter room, you might want 3 or put it into cinema home. On the Sony, drop gamma by -2 and you'll get that reference darkness that this scene was intended. But in a brighter room, you might just want to leave it alone. Let's do the same with this scene from Jurassic World Rebirth. G5 looks a little too dark, Sony looks a little too bright. Make the suggested adjustment. And voila, they both look like the reference monitor. With those quick fixes, both TVs track the reference monitor nearly identically. So I'd consider shadow detail a wash, as long as you're willing to make those minor changes. Yes, I know, a firmware fix could do something out of the box, right? Make it more accurate. But at the end of the day, at least you know of the fixes. So don't let these minor flaws hold you back. Now, what about skin tones? So one minor caveat with the LG G5 is as the scene gets darker, you're going to lose a little bit of skin tone. Desaturation of red. As you can see, under 3 nits, skin tones feel a bit undersaturated compared to the reference monitor and compared to the Sony, so faces sometimes look slightly pale. You'll see it in the closing shots of Jurassic World Rebirth. And in 2025's Superman, as Lois enters her apartment, her face is under 3 nits, but in a well-lit office, her face is perfectly rendered by the G5 to match the reference monitor. Yes, we'll talk about the Bravia 8 Mark II looking a bit inaccurate next. Its green is undersaturated, thus pushing magenta. So in those darker scenes with rich skin tones, the Bravia 8 Mark II nails it. The G5 definitely fell behind. This is a win for the Bravia 8 Mark II. Now, professional calibration should address some of this issue, but not necessarily all of it. Talk to your calibrator to make sure. But to be fair and balanced, the Bravia 8 Mark II isn't perfect either. It also suffers from its own out-of-the-box color accuracy issues, specifically at every brightness, whether it's low luminance, dark scenes, to the brightest scenes. The green is a bit desaturated. In Jurassic World Rebirth, you notice that the grass is slightly undersaturated compared to how the G5 matches the reference monitor. Yes, you can turn on Sony's live color to boost it, and it helps, but then face is starting to look a little bit flushed. You'll also notice the slight desaturation of green in movies like It Part 2, where green plays a big role in some scenes. So here's the trade-off. Without a professional calibration, the LG undershoots red in darker scenes, and the Sony Bravia 8 Mark II undershoots green in all scenes. But without a reference monitor, you might not be able to tell. Nevertheless, it has to be mentioned. So neither TV has perfect color accuracy out of the box, uncalibrated. You have to choose which affects you more. Let me know in the comments below. Which one bothers you? Next up, let's do HDR streaming on Netflix, specifically The Witcher. For this comparison, I'm using Sony's calibrated Netflix Dolby Vision mode from the Bravia 8 Mark II's internal app to see if it improves that green undersaturation. It doesn't. I'll put the Sony on the same HDR feed for the same scene so you can see for yourself. Sony's slightly desaturated green actually makes pale faces look a bit healthier, if that's important to you. This is where the inaccuracy plays to Sony's advantage, even if it is technically inaccurate. While the LG G5 more often than not sticks closer to the accuracy of the reference monitor, with more faithful color tracking as long as the scene isn't too dark. Now, what about free TV or free ad-supported TV, right? Fast. So we're going to compare The LG channel that's native to the G5 and Sony's own Google TV Live channel that's native to the Bravia 8 Mark II. And on the reference monitor, I'm using the Chromecast Google TV. And you can see, hey, how do these TVs compare when it comes to the free SDR content that comes over the air streaming? What you'll notice is the LG Channel app is built in and ready to go with all its channels connected to the app. Whereas on the Sony, you'll need to also download Sumo or Pluto to launch either Fox News or CNN or any other feeds. Even older shows like NCIS on free TV look crisp with strong processing, but in terms of image quality of both TVs, they look fine. They look great. I think the upscaling works for both TVs. Image processing is spot on. I wouldn't choose one over the other. Now, what about that bugaboo posterization issue that many reviewers and enthusiasts complain about the G5? Here is where you're going to see the difference. Well, not quite. Let's check out the difficult scene that does have posterization for many TVs, and that would be Monster Hunter in this flare scene. You see that red flare? Yes, the G5 does show some banding, but here's the surprise. The Bravia 8 Mark II also struggles in this same scene, whereas the reference monitor has no issues. In some cases, it's even more noticeable on the Bravia 8II. So while the G5 gets called out for this issue, let's call out the Sony Bravia 8 Mark II for doing it just as badly in HDR. And no, calibration is not going to help with this problem. It's all image processing. Now, what about the other TVs using the same technology? Only Samsung's S90F and S95F do this scene perfectly, no issues. That tells me their image processing is actually superior to Sony when it comes to the posterization color banding issue, and the Panasonic Z95B, although not perfect, right? Not as good as the Samsung S90F or S95F, it does better than the LG. So if these are the scenes that bother you and you want primary RGB OLED, the Panasonic Z95B is the primary RGB OLED of choice, my personal TV, or get the S90F for $1,000 less than the S95F, because I'll tell you, it's not $1,000 worse. S95F may be a few $100s better, but not $1,000. So my choice for this scene, Samsung S90F or the Panasonic Z95B. But let's be balanced with posterization. Honestly, I don't think it's a deal breaker for either TV, because look at what I had to find to show you guys that. This scene does not happen often, right? The flashing red flare. I mean, unless you watch movies that do this a lot, and even in some scenes that do it, like It 2, I didn't see it on It 2, I just saw it on Monster Hunter. So it really depends on the movie, on the source, on your signal, and this is just a particularly difficult and challenging movie for image processing, even for a Sony in HDR. So let's wrap up this rematch. Here's how we land. Without calibration, I think both TVs are too similar to say one is clearly better than the other, but they're definitely use case specific. If you prefer HDR impact, the G5 bar none. Sports HDR impact, and it goes up to an 83-inch size with that amazing primary RGB OLED panel. Not even the Panasonic Z95B comes in 83-inch size. The Sony, on the other hand, it does err on the side of less green, but for many people, that may be pleasant for skin tones, because you'll never see a pale face in any content, regardless if the creator intended for you to see a sickly face. He'll look a little bit healthier on the Bravia 8 Mark II. So as a bright room TV, the G5 definitely excels and beats the Bravia 8 Mark II in one more thing. That's the anti-glare coating. In a bright room where reflections are a problem, you'll want the G5. The Bravia 8 Mark II doesn't have a good anti-glare coating. That TV is more appropriate for a light-controlled room. And speaking of the ownership experience and quality of life issues, the G5 is WebOS. The Sony Bravia 8 Mark II uses Google TV. Now, in comparisons of the two UI, most people prefer navigating on Google TV because it's easier to navigate. Also, on the LG G5, the remote is still that if you shake it, the finger jumps up and it's very frustrating. Can't turn that off. More importantly, it doesn't have an input. You'll have to figure a way out around that. My quickest way around that, I just buy a $9 LG remote from Walmart or Amazon and I'm done. I do that with the Samsung TVs as well, right? I have the universal remote from Samsung that works with all the Samsung TVs. The Sony does have an input button, but then it has a different quality of life issue, and that is the stand is too wide. It's literally on the far edges of the TV, but then the G5 doesn't come with a stand. You have to pay like $100 or $200 for a stand. Might not be an issue if you're paying this much anyway. And lastly, keep this in mind, and this may be the actual deal breaker for many of you. The G5 comes with a panel replacement warranty. That definitely is important if you're afraid of burn-in. It covers burn-in replacement. Doesn't include labor, and this is for the USA. I don't know about the rest of the world. While the Sony Bravia 8 Mark II, typical 1-year warranty, I suggest getting an extended warranty. But here's the more important question for you. Are you willing to look at models beyond these two? Say a Samsung or a Panasonic. As we mentioned, the Samsung S90F doesn't have that anti-glare matte coating, which I personally like, but many of you, I get it, don't like it, and it's only slightly less bright than the S95F, and as we've seen, even in Jurassic World Rebirth, you don't need the extra brightness. The S95 or the S90F, my OLED TV editor's choice, will fit most people's use case, but if you want the best of the best, I think the S95F out of the box, uncalibrated, does more things right than wrong and would be my choice over those two TVs. Now, check out my rant on how dim the latest HDR blockbusters have been, and how the HDR hype misled TV makers into a pointless brightness war.